Welcome to the Real Estate Brief. I'm Adam, and today we're cutting through a lot of the noise. We're going to get to the truth that is in the news, look at the data, and I'm going to give you some of my observations and where I believe you can find the opportunity inside of all of those headlines. So if you're ready to gain your real estate edge, let's dive into our very first story. All right. So this story here is Washington. This is the state Washington, not Washington, D.C., but it's talking about Washington to consider requiring all listings to be marketed publicly. Let me just pause for just a second before we get into the article. There has been just a crazy amount of talk in regards to private listings, listings that agents go out and they get, and they don't immediately start marketing them to the general public. They call it private listings. And typically different MLSs have different rules on how long that can be. It can be 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, or whatever. So each MLS has different regulations that they allow brokerages to do this. So it's kind of, there's not one specific way to do this. So check with your state and your local association to see what the rules are for you. But this whole argument has been going on because mainly because there's a large company called Compass that has always championed, the rights of homeownership and the right for homeowners to decide what they want their property to be done with and how they want it to be marketed. So that's always been kind of that position. Then you have the real estate portals out there like Zillow and Trulia and Realtor.com and things like that are really, again, I would say Realtor.com doesn't take as much as a strong position as Zillow would. Zillow's been outspoken. I mean, even lawsuits and everything else against companies that come up and want to do this. Think it's anti-competitive. So there's just constant pull, back and forth. Do we allow private listings? Do we not allow private listings and all this kind of stuff? So whenever you have like these opposing entities and really companies in general, right? Because that's what's happening here. These companies are battling each other. It's natural for then legislators and governing bodies to kind of weigh in and take more notice of these type of arguments and then begin to kind of regulate what's happening. So then you had this debate going on the public square about if this is a good idea or if this is not a good idea. There's arguments to be had on both sides. Zillow is going to say that it's anti-competitive for other agents not to be aware and other buyers not to be aware that it's now confined to a brokerage, that only they can then sell this property and market this property, that kind of stuff. But then at the same time, then you got the brokerages that are doing this and they're saying, look, we've got sellers that maybe they don't want their home announced just yet. Maybe they want to test the market. They want to figure out if the pricing strategy is going to work for them. So it gives them a few days to kind of assess the property and the responses. It gives a brokerage enough time to maybe get their agents through the property to assess the property, give an opinion about the property before all of that data hits the market. So it's a way for a seller to strategically test the market in a lot of ways. It's not about being anti-competitive. And this is the argument on this side is it's not about being anti-competitive. It's about representing your client well. So this is the point of tension, right? That's where we find ourselves. So now we come to this article that came up today as I was kind of perusing what I wanted to share today. And this is in Washington State. They are weighing a massive shift that could actually ban, and traditionally it's been called pocket listings, but it's more like off-market or private listing sales. And it's going to be requiring all listings that agents obtain to hit the public market. All right. So while the headline screams like regulation, the real story is more about transparency versus seller privacy and what that looks like, right? So we got regulation entering. Like I said, it's like you got these entities that are battling. Regulation then comes in response. So we just want to kind of step back and listen to what's going on maybe in other states. You might be in Washington watching this. That's great. I would be curious to see what you've heard about this and what your opinions are on this. You can let me know in the comments about that. I would love to hear that. But regardless, a lot of us in other states this is not coming through just yet, but when one state does it, other states might follow. So let's just have this conversation. So let me share my screen like I always do, and we're just going to kind of go through this article real quick. And it says Inman exclusive. It says a draft bill in the Washington state legislature appears to be the next staging ground for the fight over how real estate listings are marketed. All right. So it says in the latest twist in the real estate listing saga, Washington Realtors said that it is supporting a piece of legislation that would restrict the use of private listing networks in the state. The bill is expected to be filed publicly this week in the Washington state legislature, which began its 60-day legislative session on Monday. A draft of the bill was obtained by Emmett on Monday. The bill would amend existing state law related to licensing law and unfair practices, and it would require brokers and market properties to the broader public rather than a limited or exclusive group of prospective buyers. So, just we'll pause for just a second. So we've got a statement there. There's a little bit of an implication that's being made that the reason why people do this is for that reason, like a limited or exclusive group of prospective buyers. The assumption that's being made on that side of the argument is saying that it's going to be an exclusive group of prospect buyers. That I'm not saying that's not the case, but that might not be the case in all its entirety, right? The whole story is there's many reasons why someone might do this. Now, I think there's a good argument on both sides of this aisle, right? So we're just trying to kind of pay attention. I like the idea of freedom of choice. I don't like being told what is best for my client. And so in some ways, there's a little bit of me that says, well, okay, I understand the argument being had that by doing this, you have the ability to market it to your select buyer pool, and that could create problems. And I would agree that could absolutely create problems. Even on the fair housing front, I think that could be a little dangerous slope. But at the same time, the freedom for the seller to then make the decision to be able to do it or not needs to be a factor in this whole entire conversation, because there are scenarios where a seller does not want their home immediately marketed. And there is a strategy to be had by not immediately putting it out there, so you can test the market a little bit and make corrections and get better photos if you need to, hear other people's opinions about it before you launch it mainstream to help it sell. And if you really think about like the luxury market, that's a big one, right? You go out and you have to do all this marketing, kind of get everything prepared, and then you just launch it. And then if something happens and you get bad, criticism over price or whatever, now you're readjusting that. And you kind of missed your opportunity for that best window of time, which in real estate's always been right around the first 2 weeks, right? That's when you get the most showings, you get the most eyeballs on the property, that kind of stuff. So you lose a little bit of that leverage there. The counter argument, though, that Zillow would make and all these other portals is then it skews the data, right? It skews the data. It doesn't show you a historical record about what has actually happened with that property, and that can cause some confusion. So man, it's just a little bit of a difficult thing to kind of come to grips on where it should be. It said the bill would amend existing state law. In a video update last week, leaders from Washington Realtors said they would support the change as part of what they said was the organization's goal of making the state the most consumer-friendly place to buy and sell real estate. Okay, argument. Ultimately, we feel like the use of private listing networks is at odds with our goal of being the most consumer-friendly state in the nation to buy and sell real property, Ryan Beckett, president of the association, said in the video. We believe that the potential growth of private listing networks poses a threat to the transparent marketplace that ultimately benefits both consumers and realtors, he added, and it could move us backwards in fair housing practices. There's some truth to everything that he's saying, right? There is truth. And let me just say this, like I'm just, if I can just be directly honest, like I think there's an element of truth in everything that we kind of go back and forth. All right. And here's the thing, regardless of where this ends, let me just frame your mind. Guess what will happen? We will adjust to this and carry on business as usual. Okay. So we don't want to sit here and read this kind of stuff and start going down the road of, oh my gosh, like we won't be able to do this or we won't be able to do that. The reality is we are resilient, that we have hundreds of years behind us to say that we are. We're still relevant. So regardless of where this lands, we're going to be just fine. So let's just get back to the story. I just wanted to say that. All right. More on the bill. A draft of the bill was shared with Emmett on Monday afternoon ahead of its expected public release later this week. It is unfair practice for a real estate licensee to market the sale or lease of residential real estate to a limited or exclusive group of prospective buyers, prospective tenants, or real estate licensees, or any combination thereof, unless the real estate is concurrently marketed to the general public and all other real estate licensees, except as reasonably necessary to protect the health or safety of the owner or occupant, the draft language says. So there's going to be a little bit of leniency inside of this bill. Okay, we're not reading the bill right now, but they're elaborating on this. There must be some language in there that allows some exceptions to this bill. So let's go ahead. Okay, we get that whole argument. That's easy. Let's get to where, like I said, Compass being a big proponent of this. If you wanted to go back and kind of get more of a detailed understanding about what Compass is and what they're trying to do, on the live stream yesterday, I talked about Compass. They had a press release. They talked about their mission and kind of what they're trying to do. You can go back and watch that. It's yesterday's live stream, so I won't labor this, but this is Robert Refkin. Robert Refkin is the CEO, president of Compass, and he's very much for home sellers having freedom of choice. Okay, that is his position. He's developed a whole marketing plan for that specific reason. That's where he lands. So it says in response to the news of the bill, a Compass spokesperson called the legislation a veiled attempt to limit consumer choice. It says this bill is a veiled attempt by NWMLS and Zillow to preserve their market dominance by restricting homeowner choice and limiting competition to the detriment of sellers and agents alike. This is the counter argument that this bill benefits Zillow and other initiatives like them. Okay, so that's the argument. The statement goes on to say, Compass believes Washington homeowners deserve the same flexibility to choose when and where to market their homes as homeowners in every other state. Every other state offers flexibility that allows homeowners to test pricing. So this is the point, right? So every other state offers flexibility that allows homeowners to test pricing, gain critical positioning insights, retain their privacy and confidentiality, and generate early demand without public price reductions or days on the market. So that's exactly what I'm saying. This is that point of tension here, right? Compass, which closed on its acquisition of Anywhere Real Estate on Friday. So that took place. I elaborated on that on last day's live stream. So if you want to go check that out, you can go watch my talk through what that means and how that works and their press release and stuff on that. Check that video out. But in a nutshell, Compass acquired Anywhere, which Anywhere is a conglomerate that holds some of the largest, well-known real estate franchises in the world. You're talking about Century 21, Coldwell Banker, ERA, Sotheby's, Better Homes and Gardens, At Properties, and things like that. So large acquisition here, large merger that now puts about 340,000 agents around the world under the umbrella of Compass. So a massive acquisition, a massive shift in the real estate market, to put it in a nutshell. All right, the listings, which the brokerage calls Compass Private Exclusives, allow sellers to test pricing and otherwise prepare homes in an off-MLS period. They can receive offers and sell in that stage, though most eventually end up on the MLS. And it's a really high percentage. I think it's like 98% of them end up on the MLS because, it's a really small pool of marketing that's even possible at that short amount of time if you can't go public with it. Compass fully supports and complies with fair housing laws. Listing access, royals, and industry. The debate over private listing networks flared up in Washington last year when the Northwest MLS briefly cut off Compass's license to the MLS IDX data feed in April. So this is already a point of tension between these groups, right? Compass sued Northwest MLS in response, saying the MLS was acting as a monopolist in Washington and Oregon. NWMLS is a monopolist and a combination of competing real estate brokers, Compass said in its complaint, filed in the Western District of Washington. Nearly 100% of the residential real estate transactions by Seattle area real estate brokers are listed on WMLS, and NWMLS has no meaningful competitors, meaning no rival MLSs. So it's a statewide MLS. So interesting. Or yes, I don't know. I need to research this a little bit. I'm not sure on how large of a reach this is. A jury trial is scheduled for October. So this is interesting. Yeah. So there's definitely tension here going on. There's motives on both sides, and we'll see how this plays out. But we won't labor that anymore. You guys get the point, right? You guys see that, again, we're just wanting to pay attention to what's going on and what is being said, right? So obviously a lot's going on, but we'll take a pause and in spite of all of these things, what I would challenge you to do, and I always kind of end going through an article kind of with my own thoughts, my own observations, and just some action items or something I can tell you guys to do. So that's the whole point of this, is when I read articles like this, I think it behooves us to review our own coming soon private listings, the inventory out there, and how we go about that in our local associations. So when you read these type of things, I would go back and read what your clear cooperation rules are in regards to your MLS and do as they say. Don't deviate from what is allowed and what is not allowed. Do as it is said. Pay attention to what is going on out there. But when you audit that process and you go through that clear cooperation rules, look for the opportunity to how you can better serve your client. Go in there and think strategically about, with these rules in place, how can I use that policy, that clear cooperation rule to the benefit to protect and benefit my sellers or my clients, right? So be familiar with how those work and look for the opportunity in them. Then what I would do after you have a clear understanding and you have maybe a strategy on how to market that property, what I would then do is prepare your sellers for a conversation. I would develop either a script or a PDF or something you can hand out talking about the differences between public exposure versus private listings and some of the leverage either way, right? So will it help you sell your home better if we didn't put it on the market immediately, or would it hurt you, right? So have that conversation. You are a business owner, think like one. Look for opportunities to represent your clients well. Don't just hear this and then respond to it. Go local and figure out what to do from that. What I would then also do is I would pay attention to your own local state, counties, and cities to see what is going on as far as legislation or regulations that might be coming down the board, right? Just pay attention. All right. I'm always of the mind that having this kind of conversations, if this is in the news, having these conversations with your clients, because it's going to make you the authority to be able to answer questions when they come up. It puts you on point and helps you to be the agent that is delivering the ultimate value back. Okay. All right. So with all that being said, let's jump into the actual, the headline for today that I was actually going to share at the very beginning and decided to deviate and do this, which is the beautiful thing about having no script and not really worrying about it. So thank you for being here. If you guys are here, let me know in the chat if you're here. I'd love to say hi. So, all right. Story number 2 is it's titled "Something Big Just Happened in the U.S. Housing Market," real estate CEO says, and it could mean the difference of being able to buy a home or not. All right, this is always so funny. It's like these major headlines, right? So I'll show you where this article came from. It's being shared by Yahoo Finance, but it's actually written by Fortune magazine. So what are they doing? Well, they're signaling that there is a big shift in the market regarding rates and affordability. Okay. So when we get into this article, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about regarding rates and the affordability of homes. The headline this here is absolutely designed to spark, I'm not going to go as far as to spark fear. Well, I guess I could, because if you read I'll just share my screen. If you read the headline, it's like, it could mean the difference of being able to buy a home or not. Well, okay, yeah. I guess there's a little bit of fear mongering. I would put it more in the category of like FOMO, like your fear of missing out on what might be happening here. I think that's the initiative behind this, but I think there's a little bit of fear to buy a home or not. Look, the reality is this: is rates adjust, income adjust, inventory adjust, and guess what? It's been doing that since the beginning of real estate ever. So this is nothing new. It's just hanging there. We'll hang it there. All right. So this is what they're doing. This is what they're talking about. So let's just let's break this article down and get to what it's actually saying, what the data is saying, and what they're actually arguing for. And you'll see that it's actually not fear mongering or anything like that. It's actually they bring to the forefront thoughts that helps us to be able to navigate what is actually taking place in the market and how to find the opportunity in that. And it is a shift. So let's be aware of the shift. All right. So it says, during the pandemic era housing market, home buyers enjoyed a sub 3% rate, ushering in a wave of home buying among younger generations. But in the following few years, the American dream came crashing down as mortgage rates and home prices rose and inflation and wage stagnation set in. Okay, we're still holding that bandwagon of let's sell ads and get people to keep reading. Have you ever noticed this? Like when you read like articles, like it starts off really exciting and it gets into the data and it's just like kind of gets boring. That's kind of what's going to happen here, I think. All right. That meant more homeowners in the U.S. had sub 3% mortgage rates compared with today's 6% range rates, creating a lock-in effect. All my previous live streams, I've talked about what the lock-in effect is. In essence, he's laying it out very simple, right? Someone bought at 3% rate. they can't go out and buy a house right now and get anything close to what that rate is. And they're going to have to pay a lot of times double the rate. So therefore they're locked into the mortgage that they have or the home that they have because they're going to pay a lot more if they move. Okay. So that's the lock-in effect. All right. In which current homeowners refuse to go. Okay. So we're going to jump down, but now there's a crack in the lock-in effect. And this is the crack. And I actually shared about this, I think yesterday or maybe Friday or Thursday's live stream. Real estate investor and ReVenture CEO Nick Gurley recently said that as of the end of 2025, there are actually now more homeowners with mortgage rates higher than 6% than borrowers locked into sub 3% rates. So, major shift, right? But this is what do you expect, right? So, I mean, if you think about this, like you know, 2021, what wasn't it? I think it was like probably 2021, 2022, your rates start going up and they spike up to probably like 8% or something like that. Something really ridiculous, like maybe just under 8. And then what ended up happening, right? They ended up kind of coming back down just a little bit. But you're talking about a good solid 3 years of higher rates of still, guess what? The market didn't crash. People still bought houses. And so they still bought houses. So now you got 3 years in of a higher rate. So yeah, the tipping points kind of begin to happen, right? Because now you've had 3 years and the average person lives in their home 5 to 7. So we're getting close to where that lock-in effect has now shifted. So yep, there we are. So again, this adds to the point that we're not looking at a crash, like some articles have said. All right, something big just happened. Gurley wrote in January 3rd, X post, referring to the change in his share homeowners with, during the lock-in effect period, millions of existing homeowners with ultra-low rates have been financially disincentivized to move or trade up, i.e. buy a more expensive, larger home, which made the number of homes for sale scarce for would-be home buyers. This led to younger generation bidding wars for a limited pool of starter homes and kept many locked out of the market. In fact, the average first-time home buyer age skyrocketed to 40. And I just did the whole article on this too. That's the thing. That's the highest it's ever been. If you go back just a year, it was 33. It was 33. Now, do you guys see what's happening here? Like, and this has been really good. As I'm doing these live streams and I'm reading these articles, if you're coming regularly, you'll see that we are able to understand shifts. We can begin to see it. It's not about just reading this one headline. It is about staying on point and listening and watching, and we can make these calls and these decisions, and we are better at guiding our clients. Like, you see what's happening. Like, even right there in that moment, it's like skyrocketed to 40. I could recall an article that I just read going through the data where we were at 33. So when we're asked how the market is, guess what? We're able to answer it way better than the average agent because we're listening and reading and staying informed. So again, this is why this is such a very important discipline if you're going to be a professional real estate agent. We are asked that question all the time. How's the market? We got to be able to answer it. Not just, well, we've sold so many houses. It needs to be concrete. Anyway, sorry, that was a bunny trail soapbox moment. And the share of first-time home buyers plummeted to a record low of 21%. The historically low share of first-time buyers underscores the real-world consequences of a housing market starved for affordable inventory. Jessica Lotz, NAR Deputy Chief Economist and Vice President of Research, said in a statement, the share of first-time buyers in the market has contracted by 50% since 2007, right before the Great Recession. But that all could change, Gurley said, since fewer homeowners have the attractive sub 3% mortgage rate. So, yeah, let me just say this, and this is on another topic that I shared about, but when we start talking about the affordability and things like that's happening and what we need to try to do to address this, and when you start reading articles about how the housing market has been starved of affordable inventory, that puts this into context about why Trump and other, I will say, both sides of the aisle, but Trump just came out with a post, I talked about it last week, about banning large institutions from buying up residential homes. Again, I don't care what side of the aisle you land on. Doesn't matter to me. I don't even really care about politics. I listen to politics, I pay attention to that, and I vote. But then I navigate the circumstances that I find myself in based upon that vote and who's elected, right? I don't care about the politics behind it. I will disagree with Trump if I need to disagree with Trump. I'll disagree with anybody that doesn't make sense to me when I read through these type of things. I don't care. when I read the post by what he made, and he talked about banning large hedge fund companies from buying up swaths of real estate. I did a whole video on this, on why that's actually a good thing. That point right there where it's the affordability factor. If you got these big hedge funds coming in with cash buyers, they buy up swaths of land or swaths of homes. You eliminate that first-time home buyer. They end up becoming tenants of the very home they tried to buy. And there's many other reasons. You can check out that video and go into details about what the risk of having that is. All right. Since more existing owners have a higher rate, that means more have a payment and rate closer to market, he explained, which means there will be more incentive to sell, which is actually good news. Gurley analyzed third quarter of 2025 data from Fannie Mae's mortgage database. A turning point on rates. Gurley's analysis shows the share of mortgages with rates of 6% or higher has surged from about 7% in 2022 to roughly 20% by late 2025. Overtaking the once dominant pool of pandemic-era borrowers with sub-3% rates. So simply put, we've now have a shift, right? You've now got a buyer pool or a seller pool that is now more likely to sell because they've already bought 3 or 4 years ago with a relatively high rate. So compared to what it was pre-pandemic or during the pandemic. So if this is the case, then we're seeing a shift back to where you're going to see more inventory, right? Following me? Makes sense. This is happening because even today's depressed sales and refinance environment, each year, about 5.6 million Americans take out a new mortgage, now at 6% plus rates. Meanwhile, mortgage rates have fallen from 23-24 highs, peaking at 8. Yeah, so that's what I was saying, about right around 8%. In October of 2023. Today, the average 30-year fix hovers around the low 6% range. Now, yesterday I talked about on Friday, we actually dipped below 6. It hit 5.99 for a 30-year fix, and I think it was like 5.69 or something like that for FHA. So really low rates, right? To be sure, Gurley's analysis doesn't mean he predicts mortgage rates themselves are falling. Plus, economists and housing market experts say full return to sub-3 is unrealistic. Not happening, guys. Not happening. I think we're going to see this fluctuation of percentage. We talk about this all the time. I was wrong. I didn't think it was going to go below 6. But I think Trump made some kind of mention, and it caused a little bit of panic in the market, and it caused the rate to go below 6. Anyway, but still, we're going to be hovering right around the 6, in my opinion. The circumstances that lead to rates to sub-3. We're just going to skip on down through this. The affordability gap and what 2026 buyers should expect. That imbalance also explains why more than 75% of homes on the market are now unaffordable to the typical household. According to a recent Bankrate analysis, which found most Americans are $30,000 short of what it takes to afford a median-priced home, Americans now need at least a 6-figure salary to comfortably own a typical property in most markets, yet the average salary is just about $64,000. So just to kind of summarize this up too, when you start looking at that, the income threshold. So what we have seen, and I talked about this again in a previous episode, is what we're seeing is the inflation of the home is roughly right around 2 to 3% month over month, right? So we still see a very slow increase in equity and value in homes, but it's really slow. The actual income rate of the amount of money someone's making is increasing by about the same amount percentage year over year. So we still see a little bit of a gap there, but it's catching up. But here's where, we got to pay attention is there's other factors that determine affordability when you start looking at the economy as a whole. Because it's not necessarily always just about the number of income, like how much do I earn versus how much I can afford. Yep, that's part of it. But don't forget, it's the overall expenses. Now, yes, certain things have went up in cost and increased in price, but some things have come down, even like gas prices and things like that, right? You've seen an adjustment. So all of these things are constantly being monitored. And when you're trying to navigate an economy, it's like you make a decision here and then something over here happens. It's just not cut dry. It can be very difficult to manage an economy that has so many moving parts: import, export, tariffs, no tariffs. Supply and demand is constantly being ebbed and flowed, and the amount of what we're actually consuming versus how much we're exporting. All these variables. There's just a lot going on here. Okay, so remember, like these moves cause something else to happen. It's just a constant change. Economic forecasts offer only modest relief for mortgage rates and housing affordability, while housing analysts expect mortgage rates to drop slightly in 2026 compared to 2025. That won't make a massive difference in housing affordability. A recent analysis based on Realtor.com data shared with Fortune suggested it would take one of three unlikely shifts to restore broad affordability. A steep drop in mortgage rates to the mid 2% range ain't happening. A more than 50% jump in household incomes, probably not happening. Or a roughly 1/3 plunge in home prices. Here's what's probably going to happen. All three of those things are going to do corrections over time, and you'll have this balancing equilibrium. We see the housing market remaining relatively stuck without major progress being made on affordability until we see income growth rapidly accelerate. Unlikely. Mortgage rates decline very materially. Unlikely. Some prices home materially. Unlikely. So point being, look, I think what you're going to see is all three factors coming into some kind of equilibrium because the market is dictating the value of a home. So buyers can afford XYZ. If the home's not selling, guess what the seller does? They adjust their price to sell the home to said buyer. So you're going to see a correction in the market overall. Nothing drastic. So we keep talking about this. The market's probably going to stay more even keeled. All right. So that's what we see. Now, what does that mean for us? Like where is the opportunity for you real estate agents out there in spite of this news, in light of this news? Like if we're not going to see anything drastic, but yet we're seeing this shift take place in affordability to some degree, and we're talking about interest rates and all that kind of stuff, where's the opportunity, right? Where's it at? Well, guess what? I talked about affordability mapping. You guys know what that is? Affordability mapping is taking the current state of what mortgage rates are, what income is, looking at programs, incentives, and breaking that down. In other words, you're going to sit down and show your clients, if they say I can afford a $3,000 a month payment, you're going to break this down and you're going to show them the affordability about what $3,000 a month payment looks like. If it's $2,000, you're going to break that down, right? And then what you're going to do is you're going to take that number and you're going to go 6 months, 12 months back and show them what the affordability would have been based upon these numbers from 6 to 12 months ago. And guess what they're going to see, right? They're going to see what they can afford to buy in relation to where they were. So if they had bought a year ago, where would they have been? And that's the scenario. Why wait to buy? You need to show them that waiting to buy is not a good play because the market is always going to be adjusting. Yeah, it might go down, but guess what? Historically it does. It's going up, right? So you don't wait. You don't wait. All right. What then I would do with this kind of information is like if you have buyers in your pool that have just been like literally sitting on the fence and they don't know what to do, I would highly advise you guys to reach out to them, give them a call, maybe send them a video explaining this, explaining what the affordability looks like now in light of this and what the opportunity is. So I would go back and do some database nurturing, if you will, right? You might maybe even team up with a lender and throw it out there and host a webinar or like something like this. And offer, the lender to elaborate on how affordability works and what this looks like. Let a lender talk to this, right? Ask them. They'd be more than willing, right? It's publicity for them. So they like to talk about rates and things because it's their business and they can advise and guide people. All right. I just got two more here, guys, and we're going to wrap up. So this next one is really short. And this is just a follow-up I want to talk about I talked about this, I guess probably a week or so ago. And this is in regards to the 50-year mortgage. Trump had kind of pushed that out there. He mentioned like the 50-year mortgage and that kind of stuff. And to be honest, there was a lot of pushback on that. He had advisors telling him it was a good idea, and then other ones that were not. And the 50-year mortgage is circled around almost every so often anyway. But there's many reasons why it's not a good thing. Really you're in debt forever. But at the same time, most people don't stay, in the same home for that long. So you just aren't gonna have as much equity when you go to sell because you've not paid it down if you have a 50-year mortgage. But anyway, the headline is this: White House dropping plans for 50-year mortgage. So in other words, it ain't happening. Okay, that's basically where we're at. That's the article, right? It says the Trump administration is dropping its effort to push for 50-year mortgages as a strategy to encourage affordable home ownership. In November, Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Polt encouraged President Trump to float the idea for the 50-year mortgage. In other words, float it out there, see what kind of response we get, right? So he said, hey, float it out there. And then they would observe kind of the overall sentiments about what the what people thought about it. But after a backlash from many conservative allies and no great support from the financial services industry, Polk bluntly announced the proposal was off the table. I think we have other priorities, Polk told reporters on Friday when asked about the proposal. So this is part what I want to reach into, because even though the 50-year mortgage is dead, it doesn't mean they're not going to do something. So the question we have to ask is, what is it that they're going to do, right? They're still going to address the housing issue. That's still part of the play here. So what is it they're going to do? Politico is reporting that the White House is drafting an executive order focused on affordable home ownership that include changing regulations that would enable consumers to tap into their retirement and college savings accounts to cover down payment costs. Last week, Trump announced he was immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single-family homes, but he also acknowledged that the plan would need congressional approval to take effect. So that's the whole article. So we do know they're still going to be doing things in regards to this. They are actively looking at the housing market. Let's float the 50-year mortgage, see what kind of response we get. We get backlash. We didn't get much support. Not a good play, right? So then what do? They go back and they reassess and they say, well, okay, these big hedge funds are coming in buying up properties. That's a factor, small percentage. But if those hedge funds continue to do so, it's going to be a much larger percentage and therefore eliminating the everyday consumer from getting into buying homes. And then they're talking about different ways to tap into retirements and even college savings to address the down payment gap and to bring more money to the table to be able to help them bring that cost of ownership down. So they're addressing affordability. Now, what all does this look like? We don't know, right? We have no idea. But we do know that they're actively looking at these type of things. So takeaway from this is just pretty simple. Pay attention. Let's be listening to what's going on here, right? Let's listen to see what the regulations are coming down the line. When we start hearing those type of things, I will obviously be sharing them here. We'll be dissecting them and kind of going through them and working through this. What I would say, that's hilarious. Did I say 6'7"? Did I say 6'7"? Look at this. If you guys can't see, I'm going to highlight this. I think I did. 6'7". Oh my gosh, you can't escape that. That's so funny. That's awesome. Thanks for that. You got me laughing. Okay. So anyway, so I think at this point we can talk to your clients. I would start talking to your clients about kind of like the 20-year and 15-year mortgages and 30-year mortgages, and break them down. Kind of how is it that 30-year, 20-year, and 15-year helps them build wealth? Like, we had this whole 50-year mortgage thing, and that created a great conversation, a good talk, right? So now it's like, let's go back and let's talk to our clients about having a way to build wealth in our equity and break down, again, going back to that affordability map. Some people will benefit from a 50-year to a 20-year mortgage versus a 30. So just pay attention about what's going on there, and let's listen to see what's going on here. You said sorry. No, it's all good. It's great. That's what a beautiful thing about live. I just love it. That's great. Yeah, interrupt me all day long. I think, especially if you're going to do something like make me laugh. Sometimes reading through news can be very boring. So that's great. Yeah, that is such a big thing. Such a big thing. All right. Last and final article for the day. This one here is kind of about AI and how it's changing consumer habits and what that looks like and how realtors can adapt to this. Let me just say this. Yesterday, I talked a little bit about AI, and I addressed AI in actual real estate photography. And it's not that AI is bad in real estate photography, but there is a massive risk to using AI in photography in regards to even just going into an AI software and just telling it to stage it and not having the critical eye can lead to major ethical and major issues in violation of the code of ethics, and NAR's code of ethics, because you could misrepresent a property. And I use an example in one of our markets. There was a picture of a ranch house that someone obviously used AI because the kitchen island was cut off, and it put in this makeshift stool that was kind of blended into the aisle, and you could tell that was messed up. And then it was a single story ranch house. And then off from the kitchen, there was you could tell it was like they tried to embed it into the wall, but it was slightly angled wrong, but it was a stairway going up. And then when you got to the top of the stairs, it just kind of blurred off. It's like, that's not real. So then I went back and read the description, and the description said single family. There's no bonus room above the garage or anything. It's literally just a single. And you look through all the photos that were not staged, And that same photo of that kitchen looking at that wall, it's just a wall. But whoever did this image, they put into AI and said, here, stage it. And then they didn't pay attention. And they threw it up there on the MLS. And look, that's a problem. So AI is just in everything. So today, though, in this article that I'm going to share now, AI and the consumer search habit. Oh, oh, that's cool. Are you from, just out of curiosity? That's pretty awesome. So, hey, playa, try buying a house in Sydney, Australia. Is that where you're from? That's awesome. The boomers only want 1.5 mil. Golly, man. Whew. Yeah, that's crazy. Wow. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, let me know if you're from Sydney. That's amazing. Thank you for being here and tuning in. I appreciate that. All right. So now what I'm going to switch to is like AI is not just a tool for just writing just captions anymore, though. Okay. So it is drastically changing how buyers are beginning to search for homes. I even shared an article about how Google's kind of entering into this arena a little bit as well. So what we need to do is this is going to be asking us to think through and do some adapting to where the real estate market is probably leading. And here's kind of where we're going to be going with this AI, right? All right. So let me share this article real quick. Yep. From Sydney. Oh, West Sydney. Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate that. I've never been to Australia. Would love to go. It looks like a beautiful country. A lot of cool things. Although I think majority of it's desert, I think, right? I don't know. It's like you guys have Sydney and all that is really populated and around the areas. I don't know what this center is like, so you can elaborate on that. But yeah, culture is everywhere. But I taught Black American because hip hop culture is everywhere. Yeah, this is great. That's awesome. That's good. It is everywhere. That's good. Coot, AI is changing consumer habits. How will realtors adapt? All right. It says, technology has always moved, and I believe will always move faster than organizations and industries can adapt. 100%. But I will say this too, is like when it comes to like technology, I would be cautious at first, embrace later. Don't be this tech hot person that just buys into every single technology. Don't change and disrupt your systems that are working. Be very strategic on how you implement those things. Let time to kind of develop before you start doing that. Because again, our whole purpose here is deliver value and relationship back to our consumer. Technology can a lot of times distract us from doing just that. So be very, very careful. Be very, very careful with just fully embracing every new technology that comes out. As organizations in all fields feel compelled to adopt and integrate artificial intelligence, the second of those two reasons creates a dichotomy that challenges AI strategies. And this is fair. All right, the real estate sector's AI push and pull. The real estate sector is a prime example of this push and pull. As Greater Vancouver Realtor CEO Jeff King and I wrote in a RIM article titled, Real Estate Take Notice, the Consumer is Undefeated. I might read this at some point. Let me just open this link in a new tab. I probably won't get into this today, but I'm going to save that for later. It says, no matter where individuals in the sector fall on the spectrum, it is incumbent on everyone to appreciate how AI will impact them. We got to pay attention to this, right? We can't let it out. We need to be paying attention. AI is just integrating into every facet of our life. That is, each of us must understand AI in the broader ecosystem, how consumers are interacting with it, how it will impact their current marketing and consumer engagement methods, and how it will impact the realtor value proposition. I don't make a habit of eavesdropping, but I was in a hotel lobby recently when an older guest walked up to the reception desk and told a staff member that she hadn't been able to find the checkout time on their website. She said, I had to go to ChatGPT. Take careful note. She didn't say that she Googled it. That's very, very true, right? She didn't Google it. All right. How consumer behavior is quietly shifting. So here's where we pay attention. All right, guys. First, this is a shifting tide that doesn't seem to have demographic or habitual borders. Second, beyond considering where your advertising dollars are going, Google AdWords, social media reach, and SEO will all be affected by the growing presence of AI. This trend also suggests that consumers may start interacting with real estate data and information differently if they're not already. Let me pause. Do you realize that by accident, you are using AI? So the older demographic that doesn't even fully embrace technology, that is still going to Google and doing searches, guess what Google does in the suggestion at the very top? They are using AI. So This is getting so integrated that they're going to be using AI without even realizing they're using it. So we got to keep that in mind, that that's the same thing. So we need to be ahead of the game just a little bit and think of as real estate agents, how this correlates into property searches, right? What does that look like? We're moving beyond the age of typing an address into Google and receiving a list of internet pages and a pin on a map. As consumers interact with AI models and those models become increasingly exposed to real estate data, as recently wrote about in a separate Grim article, their expectations of the sector will change. Here's an exercise that'll help illustrate my point. Take a second now, go to ChatGPT, all right, and type in, if you're listening, do that and then let me know, all right? Type this in. Take a second, go to ChatGPT and type in, I live at an insert address. What is my home worth? Okay. I'll now assume you came back to finish reading this article. Okay. The first thing you notice with this type of experiment is how robust the response is. With a simple adjustment to the prompt, such as please provide a full and comprehensive comparative market analysis on the same property, it becomes even more complete. Guess what? AI is doing some of the work that we used to do. Now, before you get all alarmed, yes, it is. And it's going to become a whole lot easier for people to know the data, right? So yes, it's a shift. But what does it shift us to? Okay, if we're freed up from having to do CMAs all the time, what are we freed up to do more of? Get in front of people, build relationships. So the value shifts. So when I went back to what we were just talking about, all this information, all this data, right? Being able to articulate the information we hear to then help guide in a relational way, in a protective way, is important for our value with the person, right? So that's where we land. What this means for the realtor value proposition. The point is that as the internet and AI learning models become increasingly populated with what has often been considered proprietary information, the consumer is getting more information more quickly than they ever have. The overall consumer experience is going to change, and so the realtor value proposition must change. This is where even like places like Zillow and other places are more at risk. They are more at risk with these type of portals than we are, right? We are the bearers of going in physically in front of the people, showing houses, negotiating, using our words and our minds to help negotiate deals. Zillow and these other portals are hiding behind a wall that the only value that they have is the information that they can obtain. And then their way of putting it together to disseminate it to clients, right? So that is their value. For us, we might not have all the information. A consumer might have more information, but the consumer doesn't know how to articulate all that information and to correlate it to find the opportunity, which is what I'm trying to do here. It's like reading these articles. You got to understand the consumer reads these articles. They're not thinking like you and I are thinking about these articles. Most of them aren't even reading this. They're reading headlines from Fox and CNN and CNBC and all those places. But for us, we read this and find the opportunity. So where is that? Consider this along with the fact that consumers are turning to AI models to answer everyday questions, which going back to his statement earlier, including what time they need to check out of their hotel rooms. And it suddenly doesn't matter whether we want to adopt AI or new technology. A significant number of real estate clients are adopting it, and it's on us to understand the implications of that adoption. Our understanding of how others are impacted will also impact us. For those who have been early adopters on the AI front, as well as those who have been slower out of the gate, I encourage you to be aware of the impact AI is having on our sector, our stakeholders, and our value propositions. Have conversations with your clients about their experiences. Monitor your marketing investment and engagement stats, and be aware of how AI models are changing consumer habits. This shift is happening. It's already begun to happen. My phone itself has AI all built into it. The search platforms have it built into it. It's in all of our programs that we use on our computers. It is not going anywhere. So we have to be ahead of the game here in how this works. And it can't be just like, oh, great, we have all the information and this is the market stats and here's your CRM and this is the value proposition that I give back. And that's not the only value you have anymore. Matter of fact, that's shifting away. This is where I just stress in 2026, make it a mission to be more relational than you ever have been. Pay attention to the people you're representing on a personal level. Know them personally. Ask more questions. Ask more open-ended questions. Get to know them personally. know what their dog's name is, their cat is, and they have a pet snake, know the name of it, right? That's how personal you want to be. Get in your calendar and set reminders for their birthdays or home anniversaries and mail personal hand letters, right? These are the things that's going to differentiate you from the everyday agent that is not adapting to the changes. They can get the information now, and it's going to become more and more readily available. What they can't do is navigate the complexity of the information that they are receiving correctly. That's where you come in. So I empower you guys to be informed, know what is going on, and pay attention. All right. So what would I kind of elaborate on some of my action items, but as I was reading through this, the observation, that kind of stuff, what I would really begin to do, and this is where I can't stress enough, is I like AI. There's a place for AI, but there is a lost natural conversational language that is being stripped out of emails, out of text, out of websites that is non-existent. So what I would encourage you to do is go back and look at all of your bios and profiles and everything and change it to be natural, conversational, and human. If you want to rely on AI to generate at least a template of some kind, fine, great. Use it to speed the process along. But I would go back and I would make it you. I would audit all that stuff and make it you. Take some time. It's January. It's the first of the year. Good time to do it. We're not busy into the spring season just yet, right? So get in there and do that. All right. Again, what I would also do, and I've stressed this out, and this is part of my journey here, learning how to do this, is I'm wanting to help myself understand this better, how to do this, so that way I can help you guys do likewise as real estate agents, is thinking about this video, to double down on figuring out how to do video. Go on there and research what other agents are doing in regards to video. And I'm not talking about generating AI scripts and going through them and reading them out loud. I'm talking about, like, you're out in the field and you got something popped in your mind, an educational note or something of value. You get on there and you just record just a dumbed down video, no editing. You just send it to some clients and say, hey, I was just thinking about this, thought of you, and thought this might be helpful for you, right? That kind of engagement. That's what I would absolutely do. I would learn, though. I would learn prompts and get familiar with ChatGPT and Gemini and all these places out there, and be, informed about what is going on, right? Like how these things work, right? So anyway, that is absolutely where I would lean with all of this news. So, no doubt about it. So there you go. That is the real estate brief for today. I do appreciate you guys for being here. Thank you for the comments. I have no idea. I'm going to call you Panda. All right. Panda. So thank you for conversing. I love the joke inserting the 6-7 there. That was hilarious. That was well played. You got my brain distracted just a little bit by doing that. That was hilarious. That was good. But awesome. Enjoy Australia. That is really, really cool. Thank you for everybody else that was here. It's been great. I've enjoyed this. And I'll be back tomorrow. And I will not be streaming on Thursday. I've got to be on the road. I've got some meetings I've got to attend. So I will not be here on Thursday. And I'm off on Friday and Monday as well. So I'm not off work, just not doing this. So I will be here tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. And that will be the last stream until next Tuesday. So hopefully you guys can come back and do that. As always, consider subscribing and all that kind of stuff. If you got any kind of value out of this, consider doing that. Hopefully we can build a community here of people that just want to be, of agents that want to be informed. So that is your brief for today. I do thank you guys for being here. Also, let me just say this. There is always so much more we could be saying. I'll see you tomorrow.